Welcome to toy-polloi. Parental guidance. This video contains scenes of Lego destruction.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and we are back on Kenner's Death Star because every time I do a video people get in touch with me saying there's a few more areas they'd like me to cover to show sort of extra fixes and that. And so today we are onto the gunner level of the Death Star, which I did cover bits of this in my original restorations, but people wanted to see how to fix the launching mechanism, the exploding mechanism that fires this gun up in the air, because that is an area that is always broken. So I do need to say straight away a massive thank you to Andrew Bennington, who very kindly sent me in a broken version of this floor because the one I had wasn't actually broken. So I've now got a broken one and I can show you how to fix it. Now how this is supposed to work is there's a lever here that is sort of spring loaded. There's a little clip underneath this cannon that you push down with the cannon, and by moving this lever it unhooks the little clip and the cannon fires up in the air. So let me show you how that works and you can see what's supposed to happen. So there you go, the cannon has been destroyed by the Rebel Alliance. Now this mechanism is fairly simple, it's just a couple of springs and a little clip, but the clip that locks in place is very sort of susceptible to breaking. In fact, it's very hard to find these not broken, but I just seem to have been lucky to get one that wasn't when I got this Death Star. So this one works, as you can see, but we'll take it apart so you can see how it should look, and then I'll show you how we can fix it when it is broken. The first thing we need to do is obviously to take this apart. Now this is an unbroken one, just so I can show you sort of all the bits as they should be. First thing you need to do is actually just to remove the seat mechanism. You can just pull that off. It is clipped on by two clips here, and these are generally quite weak, so you just sort of pull it off the top and it's fine. Then underneath that you access two screws, and these are the two screws that release the plate that's on the bottom, which hides all of the mechanism for this. So we just undo those screws with a Phillips screwdriver. Make sure to keep the screws safely so you don't lose them, because you've got to put this back together in the end. So we can unhook that. Now you can see already that this has sprung up, and that's because there's quite a powerful spring in here which fires the mechanism. So I'm just going to hold everything in place, turn it over, and you can see what it should look like. So we've now unhooked those, or unscrewed those. We can remove this part, which is the lever, and you can see this is spring loaded. There's supposed to be a spring there, but often that is missing as well, and I just replaced that with a couple of elastic bands. That does the job. And this is what sort of hooks the mechanism down to get it ready for firing. And then inside here is the bit that is always broken. So you have a spring, that is what launches everything into the air, and then you have this, which you can see is on the verge of breaking because it's so weak. Now this is the bit that locks everything in place. So you've got a tiny little hook and that is pushed down and hooks into this mechanism here. So you can see that is what hooks underneath that, and that is what breaks. As I say, it is very common to find these broken. I very rarely see them sort of unbroken. This one is just on the edge of breaking. It's got a lot of stress marks there. So when I put this back together, I'm not actually ever going to sort of use this one again, because I think that will snap. But this is what it would look like if it was broken. You can see it has snapped exactly where you would expect it to, on the little weak point between the two sections, and that is what we are going to repair. It's a fairly straightforward thing to do, and we can make something that's actually much stronger than this original one. As is often the case with the fixes I show, we are going to be using some Lego to make a new version of this. Lego is very easy for everyone to get, and it's also very easy to work with and very strong. And I think it should be ideal for making something that replaces that, and I would say probably something that's going to be even stronger than that once we've finished. So the first thing we're going to use is a Lego aerial or antenna. These are very easy to get. You can get them in blue. It's not the same sort of colour blue, but it will certainly do the job, and we are going to insert that into here. We're going to have to very carefully drill a hole sort of through the middle of these four little fins. I think that should be possible, so that we can insert this in and use some plastic weld to sort of glue it into place. Then we need to find something to make this top section. I found the ideal part. Now this, I think, is the very weak point on this sort of mechanism, and I'm going to do something that's not quite the same as this, but I think should be stronger. Now there is a part called I think this is a Lego sort of Technic ball joint, and I've picked up a few of these. I planned to use them on another project and never did, and this does have a specific part number if you want to get it. It's number 32474, and the idea is I'm going to actually stick that on the end of that. Again, use plastic weld or something to hold it in place. And we'll make something that doesn't look the same, but it will do the same job, because this is going to have the same sort of ability to sort of push through the little mechanism, but also clip in place because the bottom of it is flat. I think that's going to end up being a lot stronger than this one. So really, we just got to get on and sort of make this. Now you can see here where this has snapped, we've got a little bit of the post left. We're not actually going to need that, so I'm going to trim that off. And as I always say, Lego pieces are all standard sizes, so this is a 3mm antenna, so we are going to have to drill a 3mm hole through the middle of this and try and make sure that it comes out at the top here. This could be a bit tricky. I'm going to start doing it just using a pin vise with a 3mm drill bit in, but I might actually have to get out a Dremel or something to sort of do a little bit of fine tuning. Once that's there, we can then sort of insert it and glue it in place. But to start with, I'm just going to use a pin vise, and I'm going to drill from the other side. You can actually see there's a mark where the center point is, and I'm going to very carefully drill into that, go quite slowly, and see if I can just do this by hand. It may take a little while and it may not work, but it's certainly worth a try. So let's just keep drilling and we'll see what happens. And there we go, that's the hole drilled through. I did use the Dremel in the end just because it was taking quite a long time using the pin vise, and I was just getting a bit bored really. So the Dremel went through quite nicely. You can see I've now got a hole through the middle, and that bit of Lego fits in really quite well. So the next stage is actually just going to be to glue this in place. This little end bit I am going to remove, but for now, just to hold everything in place, I'm going to leave it there. And what we're going to be using is some plastic weld. I've shown you this before as well. This works particularly well with Lego sort of blocks, and also the plastic that's been used on this Death Star playset. So you use a paintbrush or something to get the solvent onto the plastic. It's not really glue, it sort of dissolves the top surface of the plastic and then sort of welds it back together, so you get a bond that's supposedly as good as the original sort of plastic would have been sort of cast out of the factory. And in this instance we want it to be better than that. So I'm just getting a bit on here, and I'm going to liberally sort of paint it around this join, and it should melt the two surfaces together and give us a very, very strong bond. It uses capillary action to sort of join everything and sort of soak in, so you don't have to be particularly tidy with it. And in this instance it's all going to be hidden anyway, so I'll just put a load of that on there. We'll let that set. It's best to let it sort of set as well, because it takes a little while to evaporate, and it's at its strongest when it's fully evaporated. So, and this we want to be particularly strong. So I'm just going to liberally coat that. But you can see already that's starting to look pretty good, quite convincing. So let that set for a little while. I'll trim that end off, and then we can attach the ball onto the end of this. We'd obviously have to shrink that down a bit, make it a bit shorter, and then we'll give it a good go. That's now had time to set, so we can do the next modification, which we're going to chop that end piece off. I'm just going to get a pair of plastic nippers just to chop that off. You probably could do this beforehand, but I like to leave it just to the end, because it means everything is sort of held in place and sort of held quite firmly. So now you can see that's starting to look good. Now we've just got to add this piece, and we need to sort of set it to the same height that this original one was. I'm just going to see how much goes in there. So it goes in about 5mm, so I reckon if I chop that to about there, that should be right. We can always make modifications to this. It's almost perfect. I've got to chop a little bit more off of that. One tiny little piece. I'll put that in place. Yep, I think that's good. So we can now plastic weld that piece into position as well. Same process as before. I'm just going to get some plastic weld on the end of this paintbrush. Rub it onto the end of this post here. And then we can drop that on. And those two pieces should weld together pretty nicely because they're both Lego pieces. And Lego does weld particularly nicely. Also just drop a little bit around the end there just to make sure that it's firmly in place, and again we'll let that just sort of set. Put a little bit more on that as well. We'll let that set and then we can test it out. Now that this has had time to dry, we might as well put it all back together and test that it works. So this is the replacement one that you can see I've made with the Lego. So we drop that in with the ball part facing upwards. We take that with spring, put that over the top of it. We can then slot this back down. Make sure it all lines up. And we'll turn this over, and then there are two screws to put back in. Once we've got those in place, we can fit everything on and test the mechanism, but I'm sure that this is going to work really quite well. So just two screws there. We then need to take the seat mechanism, which clips on there. And now we can test this. So I'm going to push this down. It should clip in place. We should be able to hear it clip. There you go. I think that has clipped. We can even see on the bottom. So you can see that's where the ball has now clipped into the little bracket. I'll put the gun back on there. Now the moment of truth. I put everything in place. Let's do a test firing. Yep, perfect. Let's see if we can lock that back down again. Yep, that locks in place, and we'll do another test firing just to make sure that it's not a one-off. Yeah, there you go. So that has worked perfectly. Just a couple of pieces of Lego and a little bit of a hole drilled in the original mechanism, and you can see that that does work. It's very simple, but does the job. Now, if you don't want to have a go at making your own sort of modification to this, you could actually just make one from scratch, which is what I've done here. This is made out of some 2mm thick styrene sheet. Exactly the same sort of construction. This top section is exactly what I've done there, but the bottom piece, I've cut a sort of circle out of the styrene and made some little sort of wings to go around it. And that is my sort of recreation of this whole piece. And that works just as well as this one, but it saves you having to sort of modify it if you don't want to. And it takes about sort of 20 minutes to make, and again it's just as good. The only bit you have to be sort of wary about is making sure that this little piece here actually fits within the hole that's in the sort of mechanism, but you can always file that down if you've not got it quite right. And you can see this is also quite scruffily made. This was my sort of first attempt at it, so it's a bit rough around the edges, but it's completely hidden inside the mechanism, so you don't actually have to worry too much about it, and that does work perfectly. One other thing I thought I'd show on this fix, which is something I've get asked about quite often, is the broken tabs on each floor. Now these are the this is the top floor again. There are two little tabs that hook onto the lift shaft section. You see here, that is what the tabs should look like, and often they are snapped off like that, and people have asked me how I would go about replacing it. The simple answer is I would use some styrene again. This is again 2mm styrene. All I've done is I've stuck two pieces of that together, and then with some sort of careful shaping and a file, I've made this little thing. So you can see that is two bits of styrene stuck together. There's a tiny little peg section on it, and I've made this so that it fits exactly where the old little tabs should be. So you can see it's taken a little bit of filing and a little bit of sort of messing about. There's no exact way of doing it, so I'm not going to show you the process I go through. It's just something I sort of made up on the spot to make a replacement tab. It takes about 10 minutes to do, and it's fairly straightforward. You know, it's a pretty quick job to do, and you end up with something that's like this. Again, this is just the two surfaces have been stuck together using some plastic weld, and I will stick this in using some plastic weld, and once that's in place, that will be a perfectly acceptable replacement tab. It'll do the job nicely. It doesn't stand out too much. It sort of fits, you know, with everything else. And yeah, it's fairly simple to do. So I'm not going to show you how to do it because it is just sort of made up as I go along. And I think anyone can do this. Stick two bits of styrene together and then shape it. You can see I've stuck one piece slightly off center so that I've got a little thin bit there which fits inside the broken area. So you just have to sort of make stuff up as you go along, but that will work nicely. I'm going to glue this in now and I'll show you it sort of working so you can see what I mean. So there you go, that is the tab plastic welded in place. You can see that fits quite nicely. It just takes a little bit of sort of patience to make something that fits, and you always sort of double check that it's actually sort of fitting into the hole that it's going to go into in the end. But that's I'm pretty pleased with how that's come out. That's the first one I've ever made, and it took about, again, sort of 5 minutes to sort of put it together. So let's just do a quick test fit. I've got this upside down so you can see everything that's sort of going on. So we just slide that in there. As you can see, that fits pretty nicely, and that will hold that level onto the lift tower pretty firmly. It's never going to be as strong as the original ones, but actually, to be honest, I think this probably is a little bit stronger just because it's sort of held in place in more places and is slightly thicker. So I take that back. It is going to be as strong as the original one and does the job very nicely. So if you've got any tabs missing, much like I showed in the second part of the Death Star restoration, making replacement tabs for the support struts, a bit of plastic weld and some polystyrene sheets, and you can actually do pretty much anything you want. You can create things from scratch and get this Death Star back up and running. So this is it for this video. This shows just some extra features and extra fixes that I hadn't shown in the main parts of my Death Star restoration. If you haven't checked out that series of videos, then please do. I'll put a link in the description and also at the end of this video, because I cover a whole load of fixes for the Death Star station, and also some custom panels and custom floor pieces that just make the playset look a whole lot better than when Kenner first produced it back in the 70s. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.